Well, hello, and we are live. This is Jürgen here at Polymash, and welcome to another edition of SEO Saturdays. Let's get started and jump right in. So hey, welcome here. It's Jürgen from Bradenton, Florida with an SEO Saturday edition that we've been very much looking forward to. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely wife, Robin, and partner for these SEO Saturdays and, for our Polymash business as well. And, we're very excited today to have a special guest in Bob Lefavi. And unfortunately, we are having some technical issues with Skype, but I do believe that, we're connected via audio. So, Bob, can you hear us and can we hear you? That's fantastic. Thank you. And if the video resolves itself, right now we are used to sort of going into a 3-screen mode with our guest on Skype, and unfortunately we not getting the video feed from Bob at the moment, but we will be able to hear from him, and so we'll just push on as usual. And so before we get started, let me try and welcome everyone who is joining us on chat. And Robin, maybe you can monitor as well and see whether we have folks joining us, and invite them to let us know where you're from, let us hear your name, and welcome basically everyone who's joining us remotely in the chat space.
Yeah, well, we have somebody who's very seasoned with us, and that's Rick Says.
Oh, Rick, hey.
So he's saying, hey there, right up front, so he knows the protocol. So that's great, and he's in the San Diego area from memory. So anyone else who is has joining us, do say hello if you're so willing, and if you also would like to share where you're listening from. It's always nice to get a sense of where people are, where they're positioned right now in this world.
Awesome. So, we'll remind folks as they join, on occasion, and maybe I'll jump right in. We'll get to our special guest today. And, we also have a couple of submissions that we received from places as far away as Perth, Australia, Robin, which I thought would make you cheer up.
Oh,
given you're an
I don't
Aussie
need
yourself.
cheering up, but I'm delighted about that.
Cheering up even more.
The furthest we've had up to date has been Taiwan, so Perth, Australia is a little further away. So
yes, that's super far.
And it's like 2:00 in the morning.
It's 2 a.m, and so I think that's not going to be one of our live guests if I had to guess.
He may be very super keen.
But so maybe where I'll start is just to try to explain the concept, explain how SEO Saturdays works, how people can submit their own show for some podcast and SEO growth juice, on the show. And, and then we'll jump right in and we'll hear from Bob a little bit, who's just gone live with his brand new show. And so we're excited to hear about that. So, with that, maybe what I'll do is, I will try to jump into, what SEO Saturdays is and what our mission is here. And so we're doing this show because, we want to help podcasters grow their podcast and their website through SEO. And now, for some of you, that might be sort of a strange thing. What does SEO have to do with anything? And you can watch some of the earlier episodes of SEO Saturdays, or go to seosaturdays.com to see some of that content that explains in more detail. But I think this sort of says it all in one slide. That is that what we're trying to do here is, we call it flipping the script. And what we refer to as that is that here is a podcast that's only about a year old, and he's had about 190,000 downloads. And when I ask other people, how many of those people do you think visited his website? The answer is usually something like 5 to 10%. But actually look at the page views that he's gotten. This one is, and this is like a month or so old, this slide now, but, he's gotten 261,000 261,000 page views. So way more than episodes. So actually flipping the script means that people are discovering his podcast through internet search. They are looking up a topic of one of his episodes and stumble across the fact that he has a podcast, and his podcast growth, and most of our client podcast growth comes about 62% that way. And anyway, so that is the concept here. And, and also we had some questions from folks, in our Facebook group, which I'd also invite you guys to join. Details on that you can find just on SEOsaturdays.com. We have a Facebook marketing and growth group. But one of the things that we're going to touch upon a little bit today is that how people do actually, discover new podcasts. And, this graph here from last year's Edison research shows that it's mostly through internet search. So, searching on the App Store and, looking for podcasts, that seems to us podcast listeners as a pretty likely way. But the statistics from Edison Research and their annual studies on this show that actually the most popular way that people discover new podcasts is on the internet. So that's another reason for why we're here and why we are focusing on using websites to help discover podcasts and podcast content. So first, a couple of logistics. Where's the best place to watch? Well, we stream to YouTube, to Facebook groups, to the Florida Podcasters Association. Anybody from there, I welcome you to the live stream. And, those are the folks, Chris Kromitsov and his wife, who've put on PodFest along with a lot of other folks. And so we have a pretty tight connection. They allow us to stream to that group, which I'm very grateful for. We met fantastic people that way. But if for some reason you're on a mobile device and you have some trouble, you can actually just jump to the YouTube channel and go to SEOsaturdays.com. If you cannot see the chat or if you have any other sorts of issues, you should be able to just watch this on YouTube proper, and the links for that are there. So how does this work and where to submit requests for your own show? Just go to SEOsaturdays.com. We choose applications that we talk about here on the show, not just by who's on here live. Obviously we want to honor folks that are joining us live, but also, through the fact that some of the applications we receive are sort of meaningful or showcase meaningful examples of things that other podcasters could learn from when it comes to their SEO.
And I'd like to say, Jürgen, as a professor, that they are teachable moments for everybody.
Teachable moments. That's good.
They are universal teachable moments, and we all benefit.
Exactly, because even for us as supposed experts, which we are not, I consider myself an eternal student more than ever an expert, so these are the teachable moments apply to us, and we learn
Absolutely.
from every time that someone asks a question.
It's co-learning, right?
Yes.
I think we're into this co-learning stuff.
And, these questions are so interesting, at times. Anyway, so troubleshooting, we kind of talked about it a little bit. If you're on a mobile device and you cannot see the chat on our website, just watch it directly on YouTube. There's a link for it there. And anyway, cool. So shout outs today. So the big podcast being featured today, is Inspirational Sermons, and that's Bob LaFavi, our special guest, who we were so hoping we were able to get his video feed in, and we just couldn't manage it. We had some technical issues right before we started, but that's live streaming. That's how it goes. But also, and I am seeing that the second one that I want to talk about a little bit is the Moonlight Graham Show. And I'm very happy that Andrew is actually joining us. He's, I believe he is the host or co-host of that show. So I think that'll be interesting to chat a little bit about. So big shout out to that podcast. And then lastly, the one from Australia, is the one from Australia is the one from all the way from Perth, and that is the Quiz and Trivia podcast. It's a weekly show with someone named Bevo. So as we jump in, then the last segment that I want to do today is we've had some really interesting questions coming in. Actually, one from Andrew and from another few people on our Facebook group. And so I want to sort of explore some of those a little bit. And so, Robin, anybody else on the chat that we want to say hello to in the meantime?
Not that anyone else has declared themselves yet.
Yes. So, and actually, yes, Andrew is saying, and I'm just going to go back to the two shows. The Moonlight Graham show is Underdog Stories, which is Underdog Sports Stories, which is kind of interesting. I thought that was a cool sort of a reference. Yep. So, well, with that, I do want to jump over and welcome our special guest, Bob. And, I was hoping to have Bob here, in guest mode, and somehow we're only getting the voice feed. But Bob, a big welcome to you, and a big congratulations on launching your show. And, we're going to put up some slides and text and so forth, but we want to hear from you and tell us about your podcast and your launch.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jürgen. Maybe you could just show his website now. We can get at least an image of Bob. We'll see his picture on his website.
That's a great idea.
So at least we know who this human being is.
We actually met at Podfest this year, and Bob, what I was curious about is just how you just got into podcasting. How did this come on your radar, and how did you discover Podfest? What made you attend? And then we were lucky enough to meet you there. So I was just curious, on how you got started and the background on how you came into this.
Yeah, was there anything in your? I was just curious, Bob, if there's anything, in your background that was a pathway to wanting to actually do a podcast.
When Jürgen, in his presentation, when he talked about the importance of the website, it was really, to me, eye-opening. It made perfect sense. And so I began to really, think about what is it that I don't know? What is it that I can do to make this podcast, a little different, to make it more successful? And can you guys still hear me? Because it seemed like it went out.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So we had a little bit of I actually had to restart the live stream there, and I'm hoping that the guys, people listening, and that our stream isn't going to be impacted by that. But because my Ecamm Live software with which we stream here crashed, but we are back on now, and I'm hoping that everyone is okay. Maybe Andrew or someone who's in the chat space, let us know if you are still, if you can still hear us and so forth, right? Because we got some folks that said they couldn't get audio from you, but I think that was just intermittent. I'm hoping. So yeah, Bob. So. That was
to me,
such a good conference.
Right?
Yeah.
To hear you talk about, Jürgen, the importance of the website and driving the website as part of your podcast marketing and vice versa, it made a lot of sense to me. And then there's another more personal dynamic that came about here, which is why I reached out to you. First, I can tell you're a perfectionist. And I feel that sometimes, even to my own fault, I am probably one as well. But beyond that, I'm not 21 years old. This isn't just an idea that I feel like, I've got time. Let me just throw this together, see what sticks against the wall. I feel like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And if I'm going to do this, it's going to be something I'm proud of. And if I'm going to do this, it means I need to engage in an intellectual, smart way, the appropriate resources to help guide me, to teach me. I don't want to do this and, in 4 or 5 episodes think, well, nobody's really listening and just bail out. I want to do this long term. If something I'm going to bite off, I want to do it with the right resources. So that's what fueled my contacting you. And it's, and I know you didn't bring me on here to, talk to, have this be one of these pat on the back societies, but if it were not for you, I'm telling you, the podcast, I'd have no reviews, I'd have no one hitting the website, and to me, the most important thing is knowing what I didn't know, or having a feeling.
You've only been live, first of all, been just amazing in the way that you've put your content together, that approached it, and that's long game. I think that philosophy is it's really important, Robin. And you started the same way or a similar way, right?
Yeah, I think, I know this is not a pat on the back stuff, but, it's nice just to show appreciation when it's due. And Bob, you are a really good fit for us too. I mean, in terms of your work ethic and your mission, and you have this long-term view, and you're prepared to do it, well, and you're such a big contributor. I mean, it takes, it has to be a good mutual fit and a good understanding and a good kind of value set that fits together.
And just maybe I can, Bob, on the way of, I'm hoping people can see here, like how you jumped right into the top of the religion, your chosen category, when the launch occurred. And you were there for a few days, and and that's always great. I think that one of the things that we often talk about is that people tend to over focus on the statistics and the importance of sort of showing up on Apple Podcasts in the top 10 results. Used to have so much attention. People launched with an episode a day for like a month, because the thinking a year or two ago was that was going to make a substantial difference in being able to attract. It's just a lot of work. I mean, that still works to a degree, but all of those techniques that we had that worked for launching a podcast a few years ago are much less effective now. And so I think that makes it important to think of SEO, to think of your website, to think of building an audience, becoming an authority in your space, and all of those other things, and not to over focus on downloads, stats, and listening numbers. And so I think that you've had a very mature approach with that. And so what I did here is that I wanted to just quickly go to to the concept. This concept of domain authority for new podcasts, because even the way that you selected your podcast name, was inspired to make it for inspiring sound.
Well,
right?
let me, and again, I have to remind you, Jürgen, you're the one who brought me there.
Well, this is where I was going to just replay that part of where we kind of met on this, right? So this was an example that we talked about at Podfest and that we presented at Podfest. This is an actual example, but I changed the name around. But this was very much like your situation, Bob. So this was a person with a brand new real estate podcast, and that real estate podcast was called the Five Palms Capital Podcast. I'm making this up. It wasn't called that. It was something else. But it had a brand new website, and that's your situation too, Bob. And it was about multifamily investing. And so what I basically noticed was that when you're looking at SEO, and we're looking at like how many searches there are, there's actually a ton of searches for apartment investing, but it's hard to rank for. This column here illustrates the domain authority, and it's not 4 or 5 or 10 that a new website has. But one of the things that jumped out at us, and this is the method that we deployed. Look, there's somebody on page 1 these are over here on the side of you see on the right hand side. You see the top 10 search results, and there's someone with domain authority of only 3. It's a brand new site, and it's because the naming convention, the name that he has for this website is apartmentinvestmentfund.com. So if you have your key phrase that you want to look for as part of your name, then that is, gives you, it almost guarantees you that you're going to trickle into page 1 of the search results. And that's what our hope is for you, right? So instead of naming it's Five Palms Capital Podcast, we then suggested, look, call it the Apartment Investment Podcast. Take out a domain name like apartmentinvestmentpodcast.com or even apartmentinvestment.com. It was actually still available when we created this, and that would virtually guarantee you a fair amount of traffic to your website, to your podcast website every day. And there are examples of this, of people who have done this. One of them is Katie Kremitzos. So this example is women's meditation. If you Google women's meditation, the first thing that comes up is her podcast for Women's Meditation Network. Same logic, right? She's using the language, she's using the key phrase, women's meditation, in her domain name, and that's what's making her rank. Even though, look at her domain authority, I mean, she's been around for a while, but her domain authority is only 24, and everybody else on this page is like 80, 60, 70. So she rules in this space because she selected the domain name properly. And so the launch for inspirational sermons then is you picked a key phrase that 2,700 people look for, that's relatively easy, and inspirational sermons, is now your site. And I expect that, it hasn't happened yet because this is still going to take some time to trickle into this. But I think within a few months, you might be on page one for something that people look for 2,700 times a month. And, so that was the concept, right? So I just wanted to share that with folks, that are on the podcast. Yeah.
Well, you're being modest, because if you remember the conversation, I had about 4 or 5 different names for the podcast and the website. And you sat across the table from me and said, Bob, nobody's searching for those, but they're great names. I mean, isn't that a cool name? It's a cool name, Bob, but nobody's searching for those. Here's what they're searching for. And you were right. I mean, that's the bottom line. You want to come up with something pithy. Well, if you want to come up with something pithy, first, get a really successful podcast on something people are actually searching for. And then when you have an audience, you can come up with something pithy, and that's kind of what I've learned. So yeah, like I say, my best moves have been I've listened to the experts. You don't consider yourself an expert, but you're an expert, and I've listened to you. And if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have that name, I wouldn't have that domain, and there wouldn't be people searching. And right now, when I go to Story Chief and I see how many people have been looking and looking at these little profiles and looking at the reading the content, I'm thinking, I don't know this many people. I mean, obviously, there are people finding that website on their own, and I hope it looks like they're going to the podcast too.
Look, it's early days. It's very early days, and so I would just say that don't get disappointed if that goes up and down. There's a fair amount of volatility in all of this. Like one day, you're getting traffic, the next day you're getting a little less than. But the approach that you've taken. And what you're doing with your website, I think that's going to bear fruit in the long term. So, but let me ask you a couple of other questions in terms of just your experience of getting into podcasting, and this is something Robin and I have been talking about as well. It's like, so what's been the most surprising thing now that you have a couple of episodes under your belt and you're doing this? Like what are there some what's like turned out the way you expected, and what's not, or what's been surprising for you?
Here's what's been surprising: how much I like it. If you at my age, right? I'll be 60 in November, right? At my age, if you'd say, "Hey, Bob, I'm going to add a couple of hours to your week or more, and it's going to be for free, so you're not going to get paid," I would say you're going to have something that's really, fun for me to do. This has turned out to be fun for me. And who knows, long term, of course, there may be some monetizing in terms of speaking engagements and things like that. But that's not really why I'm doing this, right? I'm doing this for different reasons. But I've really been surprised at how much I really enjoy it. I mean, I really enjoy it. When you guys publish a new episode, to me, I love that. That's fun. Here's the thing that surprised me. Look, I'm trying to get the best preachers in the country to come and talk to me, and they are, and these are really good people. But when they're in a pulpit preaching, it's a performance. And they are dynamic and enthusiastic, and they are in complete control. It's a different story when they're sitting down with me and they don't know what questions are coming. They're much more subdued. And I sit there thinking, is this the same person? Have I oversold this? So and listen, I'm sure I would be the same way. That's not a slight on them. It's a learning process for me. I have to really choose my guests well and know they're going to be dynamic. And, maybe I need to learn a little bit about making them feel more comfortable ahead of time, and maybe having a conversation with them ahead of time and making them feel more comfortable with me, and maybe even floating them a couple of questions, even though I kind of don't like that in theory, maybe floating them a couple of questions just to say, hey, these are the kinds of things we're going to talk about, just to kind of make sure they don't go in with guards up.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, because Robin, is, we've both listened to your episodes as well. And I think that's Robin's area of expertise is appreciative inquiry, which is all based around a line of questioning for, that is strength-based. And Robin's probably better to elaborate on that a little bit. But, Robin, what are your thoughts in terms of engaging people? Because this is such an interesting phenomena, right?
Yeah.
That the people that are these great performers, that are preachers, are maybe not like that on a podcast interview. How do you get them to be as engaging as Bob, you are, naturally speaking?
Yeah, so I'm curious, Bob, when do you find that the guests you're speaking with comes most alive? At what point?
When I ask them about them.
Yes, I would concur absolutely. When they start telling their own story, right? Yep. And I noticed that your model at the moment is you do that towards the end. You go straight into, asking questions around the particular inspiring or inspirational sermon that they've given, and you know it well and so on. But when you ask them, what's your story, or, not that you can say, where does your inspiration come from? Because I'm sure they probably would say, God,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that when people start talking about themselves, and, there are so many great models of that. I don't know if you know the podcast, How I Built This. It's an NPR show. Maybe you don't. But, again, it's all about how people built businesses, and they just love telling their story. So, I think that's a really great insight.
Robin, do you think it would be helpful or not to start with that? Right after the intro, just saying, hey, well, let's start with a little bit about you. I guess on the positive side, it would loosen them up a little bit. On the negative side, it may be that some listeners are really wanting me to jump into the content. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm very much like you. I like to have it free-flowing and not to give prescriptive questions, but I tend now to ask a similar question at the outset, and it's like, when you think back over your life, was there a time or is there something in your personal history or your family upbringing or your culture that has put you on this trajectory to here, and is there something there that you can say has shaped you to be, this inspirational preacher? And you may not want to use that kind of language. And, and you can feel the, the cogs whirring over as people think back through their own personal history, and they find connections that perhaps they hadn't thought of in the past. And I find that helps, and then you can kind of move on. So that's what I'm experimenting with.
Yeah. And one of the other dynamics, and Jürgen, if we need to move on to another topic, just let me know. But one of the other dynamics I've seen is particularly one that is religiously based, and that is, in the Christian church, there are a number of different denominations, and sometimes see that as an us versus them, and they don't know me very well, and I've contacted them and they're going on the record, and I felt a little bit of Bob, are you trying to get me to say something that's going to agree with your point of view, that's going to get me in trouble, that, what I mean? I've sensed a little bit of reluctance to completely be transparent, and in fact, in one particular episode, the guy really loosened up when he realized that I guess my opinion was very similar to his, and he said, "Boy, I'm really glad you said that," and he loosened up after that. And so I've got to, I don't know how I'm going to approach that. I guess it's just going to have to be over time, really be ginger and thoughtful about that, and just see where that sort of leads me.
Well, I think that comes naturally to you. I mean, all your language also, while we were working on your website, and, while you were crafting language and crafting copy on how you describe your podcast, how you made it about what people will get out of listening to it, and the fact that you are sort of listener-centric, right? Like the language that you've crafted is very, very appreciative, by nature. So, I think that just comes naturally to you, and I would think that that's that's going to be continuing.
By virtue of the subject matter, right? It's very life-affirming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and Bob, now, turning this back a little bit onto the SEO side, you've submitted a number of questions, and I wanted to maybe jump in and episode topics. I wanted to jump in and maybe share with people some of the things that we're looking at on your behalf, right? So you gave us some episode ideas that, we're investigating from an SEO point of view. So if you were to create a content brief on some of these topics and cover them comprehensively, there's a good chance that you could rank on Google and that people would you can help them discover your show, your podcast, and subscribe by by basically the way that you address and the topic, the interview, or even solo podcast. And maybe before I go there, Bob, I think that was one of the things that you mentioned is that you are also considering doing some solo episodes now that perhaps you weren't planning on it initially, right?
I was not planning on it initially. And part of it is because I kind of feel that during these interviews, I feel like I may be short selling the listeners, and I'm talking about something that could be life-changing, life-altering, really, riveting sermons. And the sermons that the particular preacher gave may have been that way, but on the show they may not be. And I feel like, maybe I can add some content. Secondarily, it has turned out to be so much fun. I feel like I can go to
That's a much better reason.
Well, I feel like I can go to something every week, but lining up a person who doesn't know me, lining up a new interview every week may be difficult, but I can go every other week and intersperse between these other preachers some of my own content, and really, my wife feels the same way. She's like, well, Bob, that's kind of what I figured you would be doing anyway. This would be your your sermons, but I kind of like the idea of bringing in other preachers, because the bottom line is, folks who go to churches, they maybe they experience 5, 8 different churches and different preachers their entire life, but to give them access to other people and other ideas that get outside the box, that ask questions that they've never even thought of. To me, that's what I felt like would be an important part of this podcast. So bringing in these other preachers is important, but maybe doing both is kind of what I'm thinking. And every other week, I can certainly come up with my own content. So that's kind of the way that I was going. And this has been a change. I mean, this thing's only been launched a few weeks now, and I'm already, changing the structure of it.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Learning. Just kind of like this show too. Like even SEO Saturdays is like, we're continuing tweaking it, and we're making it. We had actually in the Q&A section today, we had some questions from bloggers as well. So it applies, but yeah, so looking at some of the SEO that, by the way, great episode ideas, and I started to sort of investigate some of them, right, and wanted to maybe go into this forgiveness theme and illustrate some ways in which you could utilize SEO tools and technologies and an approach and bake that into planning your episodes. Covering a topic comprehensively and ranking on Google search results sooner rather than later. So what I did is I looked at forgive yourself. I mean, I did search a bunch of key phrases for you, and I'm going to pull these up now And hopefully on our live stream here, folks will be able to see this. And so here, for example, is the keyword forgive yourself. And as you can see, like if I zoom in a little bit here, it's very popular. There's 10,000 people that are searching for that. But the difficulty to rank for this is 46. And what that means is that the people that will be in the top of the search results, I mean, are people like Psychology Today, the 70, 80 domain authority, 80, so this would be very, very difficult, especially for someone new to get into and to rank into. However, there are a lot of forgiveness quotes. So maybe a longer tail version of this, like forgive yourself for what, right? So like forgiveness in marriage, for example. So now look at the difference. Now forgiveness in marriage, not that many people look for it, but still 800. I mean, so for a new site, I don't scoff at anything. I would rather be on page 1 for something that only maybe 50 people search for a month. But, I have a chance of getting some of that traffic than on page 50 for something that a lot more people, search for. So in this case, looking at forgiveness in marriage or forgiveness for something, radical forgiveness, look at that key phrase, right? So does that make sense? That, you could investigate that. And I've been building a list for you with key phrases that I'm going to send you, like we do for everyone on SEO Saturdays. So I've got a bunch of keyword opportunities, and a number of them here were for forgiveness. But I thought that was a possibility. I also think that sermon on forgiveness. Take a look at this. What if you had an episode where you talk about sermons on forgiveness? Keyword difficulty is low. There's 3,100 people look for it.
Wow.
So like that's there has a fair amount of traffic. And then if I look at the search, the domain authority on these would be pretty difficult to rank in the top search results, but still that would be a better choice than, going after forgiveness per se. By the way, forgiveness in marriage, I made a little note there. I'm going to jump back into that one. Let me close some of these earlier ones here. Sorry. So forgiveness in marriage, there's someone with a domain authority of 11 who's ranking for that. Do you see that? So you're maybe a half a year away from that, or a few months. Your domain authority, it grows more quickly when your site is new, but still, the idea remains the same. So that was one, and I'll send you this after. So then, the Book of Esther. Similar story. When I actually started looking at the Book of Esther, so if you were to now create an episode for that, look at all the domain authorities, people that are ranking on that. They're in the 90s, 70s. It's difficult. Difficult for a new site, even though it's very popular, right? I mean, 19,000 people look for that, so the topic is popular. And I started looking around. There are some opportunities, like maybe Book of Esther Bible study, or the Bible study on Esther. See, 400 people look for that. So if Esther Bible study, 1,500 people look for that. So you might be able to find the type of key phrases that are, related. Or this is the value of using an SEO tool like this, or like the topic tool we had on last week. I just want to give a shout out to Rio from Topic, which is a content briefing tool. And what I'd like to do for you, Bob, here too, is out of all of these things that we're going through, is pick one element and create a content brief for you, and have you play with planning your episode, planning your interview, or planning your solo show the way that Rio demonstrated last week, and the way that we are helping people get an A content grade, meaning that it's very likely that you cover that topic in a way that will land you in the top of the search results. That's what last week's show, or last time's show, was all about.
So given all these other parameters, right? So it's within a frame of parameters.
Yes, I mean getting an A++ content grade for when you just have a brand new site alone is no guarantee that you're going to be in the top of the search results. But
Sure.
it gives you a better chance when you tickle up there,
Sure.
and it just is good practice.
So again, it's
to
that
get there.
longer term thinking. Yeah.
So that was on Book of Esther. So I will send you these
Sure.
after the show, right?
Thank you.
You had one on why you should go to funerals.
Yeah.
I-
That's an interesting one, and that comes up because, and you look, I don't know how many people are going to be searching for that, but the content is really kind of interesting. It's sort of a theological basis for doing something that most people really don't want to do. And really making people feel, that they're really participating. That there's something important about that. So it's a pet project for me, and I've done some speaking on it and some writing on it. And so it's just something that I thought I might just throw in there.
It's a lovely sentiment. So here, look at what I found for you. So it's why you should go to funerals, as you might have suspected, is actually no one is searching for that. But look at the second one. Always go to the funeral. That's 190 searches. So if you incorporate this sort of research prior to recording an episode, you might be able to tweak the title. Maybe it should be why you should always go to the funeral, right? And then you cover this as a keyword, right? So that's the value of sort of incorporating these SEO strategies into the longer term plan, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've become a believer in SEO, and I really have. And it's a whole dynamic that I never really gave much thought to. But the more I see the science behind it and how it's data driven and it's perfectly logical and makes sense, it should really be driving a lot of our decisions.
We think of it as art almost, as but it is big data, it is AI, and it is and it is science, but there's an art, the level of thinking that you would use to put yourself into your audience's shoes, what they're likely to look for, how it really is an exercise of flipping yourself to into the shoes of your podcast audience, of your listener, of the people who are looking for your content, and you're helping them. The content briefs actually allow you to craft content that satisfies your audience, answers their questions, the likely questions that they might ask. And so for me, it's a very inbound, honoring, appreciative type of exercise, so I
think it's also very expansive. We may have a particular way of looking at something and a certain terminology, and then we start doing a little bit of poking around and we see, there are other perspectives, there are other ways of looking at that. Maybe I need to look at it with new eyes. So I think that's really fun, that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we all come with our own perspectives. I mean, if there's a particular topic that I may preach on, I've probably preached on the same on that topic in the same way with the same points many different times. But just like, Jürgen, when you were orienting me toward the website, you kept reinforcing, look, it's not necessarily about what you want to say. It's about what they want to hear. So everything you're saying here really needs to be, what is this person, where are they coming from? And what's their perspective? And what are the questions they need answered? And, what are the things that they're going to leave with? Give them a value add. Why should they be here and why should they listen to this podcast? And so that's really helped me, because there are a lot of times I've never thought about that before. I've never thought about that question. Where not to say that I didn't think of the audience, but I've never put myself in their shoes and say, this particular aspect of this topic that I kind of never really have gotten into because it's just not something I wanted to get into. It may be what they're looking for. That may be the question your audience really wants to hear you address. And so it takes a little bit of, stepping outside the box sometimes to have a comprehensive sort of holistic treatment of a topic. And that's something I've kind of appreciated more.
Yeah. So that's really, that's good. And, marketers put it into pretty crass terminology when they say it's like, your audience, it's like, what's in it for me? That's typically what they say. But I do think that there's a lot more to it, and it is sort of honoring and respectful, and there's a better fit between what your audience is looking for and your own content and what you want to say. When those two meet in the right way, then that's when the magic occurs. That's when you're getting fans, and that's when you're getting subscribers, and that's when you're meeting their needs, and indirectly they're meeting yours. So, Robin, and you had something?
No, I was just going to say, you're going to show us the content brief too, right? So
yeah, so I want to
carry
go
on
back to
from-
that. I mean, like one last one is the prodigal son. Is I looked that up, Bob, and that's almost impossible. There's like 19,000 searches. But look at this, prodigal son sermon, and I'm hoping you can see this. I know that you might not have video, but you might, and it might when there's a delay if you're watching the live stream on another device at the moment. But I'm throwing up on the screen the prodigal son sermon, and that is easy and has 1,800 searches. It's got a content difficulty of 25, and if I zoom into that, 1,800 people search for it, but it's pretty easy, and so that might be another option.
That's right.
There are others like Sermon of the Parable of the Prodigal Son. People actually search for that 30, and that's like only 19 keyword difficulty, and there are a few others. Again, I'm going to just send these to you in a list.
Okay.
And or when I send you the PDF from SEO Saturdays, since you have KW Finder, I believe, right?
Yeah,
you have an account there. Yes, you'll be able to jump right into these and see the results and make your own decisions. But so what I want to do next, Bob, is can we take one of these? Which one is the most appealing out of these opportunities that we've discussed here, and we'll throw that in and generate a content brief while we're talking. Which ones of
what if we go with sermon on the prodigal son sermon?
Prodigal son sermon. Okay, so I guess maybe if I did a content brief for that, I might not choose to enter prodigal son sermon. I might just start by entering prodigal son. So, but either way, I'm going to go wrong site. I'm going to go and
Use topic.
start our content brief tool here that we
So
demoed
why
in
would you
detail.
start why would you start with just prodigal son and not prodigal son sermon?
Well, let's try it both ways.
Okay.
So I'm going to first of all do the search within. So again, Topic has a built-in search engine as well, and so if we've done our research over here in KW Finder, but I'm going to jump over and do a similar search within the prodigal son sermon. Well, it says easy, and there's 590, so this might be a good opportunity. Let me just see whether I can get rid of the and just search for prodigal son sermon. Yeah, that's easy. 720, the prodigal son sermon. Yeah, I think either one of those would be good. Robin, any opinion here? Which one I should drill down into?
No, I don't have an opinion. Although I do.
Yeah,
But I think it's really up to Bob.
Go with the easier one because Bob, I'm going to
I-
recommend the easier one because you have a brand new site and it's going to, whatever you're doing initially is going to be harder for you with a low or non-existent domain authority still. So
You're going to go with the prodigal son.
yeah, let's,
Okay.
even though they're like, because that's not such a, if you were in number one for this, versus on just off of page one for that, you would benefit from, the 590 people that are looking for that. Anyway, so I'm going to click on create a brief. And as we know, Topic, it takes a little while because it's big data and AI algorithms that are running behind the scenes here. And I'm going to explain for the folks that haven't seen this yet a little bit about what the concept is here. So the latest Google updates that rolled out recently have shown a really strong correlation between having complete coverage of one topic and the number one search results or comprehensive content coverage. So that means that, if you talk about a tiny little aspect on a particular topic, and everyone else covers it comprehensively and from A to Z and answers all the questions that you could possibly ask, Google will favor the content that covers the topic comprehensively. And what we've been asking in the last couple of episodes is that is there an opportunity for podcasters in this? And and I think that in the last couple of episodes, the answer was pretty resounding yes. There are some shows for where that might not work, but for interview podcasts or for podcasts where people want to cover a topic, it really is a fantastic way to create a brief and an outline for how you would conduct an interview, how you would conduct a solo episode, the type of topics or subtopics that you would hit, and and so forth. And so that's what we're doing here while we're waiting for this to be completed. So typically this takes a couple of minutes, and that's why I'm rambling on, if you will. But I'd be very curious to see what happens here on this content brief. So we'll give it another minute or two.
And so the expectation of what this will deliver, Jürgen?
Well, it just finished. So, I was going to show another example, but here we are, and I'm going to just open this content brief now, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So, Bob, so here are your marching orders for this, for the Prodigal Son sermon, okay? So what they're saying is that the recommended word count is about 3,000 and above. And, the word count used, the search engines use, it gives you a little explanation here. Search engines basically, rely on the word count. But that is in the last year or two, people have been writing like 10,000, 7,000 long articles. Any podcast episode, a half an hour long, is going to be 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words.
Sure.
When you get a transcript back and use the transcript to craft the article with it. So I think that's not going to be an issue. The recommended content grade, and should be an A, fine. And the keyword volume, that it shows you how many searches there are for a month. And another good piece of news is that the page type, in other words, what does rank on page 1 for this? And it's mostly articles, and that's what you'll be doing. Your podcast episode will basically function as an article. Sometimes, you might see, like, if it's 90% videos, then it's not such a good idea. But in this case, that's it. So here, the next thing that the content briefing tool provides you is showing you how other people are tackling this. And you can drill down and click through. And this link that I'm going to share with you, by the way, will be a fully functioning link. So your topic brief that you'll get out of today is a fully functioning tool that you can use to drill down and play around with, and then also to test and against StoryChief. So what we do in StoryChief is we actually take the preview as we're writing show notes, and we put that into what's called the content grading tool. And this is where you compare the content that you've written, your show notes, to how well it accomplishes everything that the content brief tells you to do. Anyway, so these are just a way in which you can see how your competitors have used the content brief. And I'm not going to drill in too much, but this is really interesting. Here are the typical questions that you should answer somewhere along the way. What does that parable teach us? So, and what's the prodigal person? What's the meaning of Luke 15? So here are some examples of common questions that people ask about this particular topic. So do you think that's helpful?
Oh man, so those can almost be like subheadings, if not exact questions, at least sort of, break it down into those different categories. And, some of those questions, some of those issues I really wouldn't have thought about. I may have gotten to it in a backward kind of way, and I might have treated it a little bit, but to be able to know that I can use that phrase, and that actual phrase is going to hit somebody, is going to be picked up somewhere. I think it's really helpful. And again, it breaks me out of the box of thinking of something in only my limited way of thinking about it, the way I've always thought about it. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, that's how we, and by the way, with what you just said and using it in a heading, like this down here, the section that actually goes in, notice that it actually tells you, like prodigal son, I mean, that's obvious, right? 25 uses in headings. And if you click on that, you'll actually see and scroll through the top examples. So what this content brief tool does is it basically, shows you the inspiration from all the people that have already written about this, and you can emulate some of the way in which they've treated that. Now, in this case, they said, yeah, this gets used in headings a lot. Now, the term younger son shows up for most folks. And so talking about the younger son, now not in headings, it says, but here, older brother, two people have used that in headings. I wonder how. Let's take a look. Older brother. I'm trying to see whether I can find it somewhere in a heading or in a subheading. But you get the idea, right? It's a really useful way of basically planning out this episode. And then what we have is a template where you copy and paste some of these ideas into. And you can just get a lot out of studying how everyone else has created this. And then in the content grading tool, right as you're writing it, or as you're using Storychief to create the content, you will be able to click through and see, for example, older brother in headings or elsewhere, right? So you can click in and see how your own content that you're writing is covering these suggestions. And by the time that you get through sort of the top 10 of these suggestions, by the time that you do that, you get an A++ content grade, and you're giving yourself the very best chance to have this episode count for your SEO, for people to discover 5 months from now. Your traffic is going to pick up, and it's just like really, it's a longer game. It won't. But I would also argue that it in the short term makes a better episode. It's better for your listeners. It helps you address the topic. So I think that this idea of comprehensive topic coverage is a really valuable tool set. And just to mention, for the folks on that, is usually costs a lot. I mean, it's like an enterprise grade tool. But Rio from Topic has made this available to us. He's cut a special deal with us and is making it available. And you can use a coupon code Polymash50 or Polymash100 to get this tool. Not at the usual $200 a month. That's how much it usually costs for agencies and everyone else. But you can get it for $50 a month, and and with using the coupon code Polymash50. So I just wanted to point that out for folks that might consider it.
That's a great deal. And the thing is, it's worth it. It's worth. When I sit down and write something, I think I know exactly what I want to say, but it's worth it for me to do a little more work. It's a little more work to make sure maybe I'm going to add a paragraph here, or maybe I'm going to go slightly this direction when maybe I wouldn't have gone that direction, or I'm going to treat this topic or at least have an extra paragraph on that or this. And it's worth it to do that, to spend a little more time doing that, to know I'm going to show up at least, maybe if not on the first page, maybe on the second page, because ultimately, it's not about having the perfect article for me. It's about having the perfect article for somebody else, and it's not doing anybody any good if nobody can find it. So this is great. I think this is great, Jürgen. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, so I love your outlook and the fact that you're playing with these, and I look at it. We've looked at it all along in the same way. Compared to all the effort that it takes to have a podcast in the first place, have a blog in the first place, create and invent this content, the effort that goes into that is so massive that we often don't understand how people then skimp on some of the tools that will make it visible, or or don't are reticent to spend any money promoting the show, boosting it on Facebook or elsewhere. So I think that your thinking is spot on. So I'm anyway, it's been really gratifying working with you on collaborating on some of this, and we'll continue to support you with some ideas for this. So So Bob, if you don't mind, I'm going to move on
You
to
bet.
some of the other podcasts that have also created submissions. We're like running into an hour already on this live stream, but so
You bet.
thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, guys.
We're going to do
Appreciate it.
this,
I'm going to stay on, but I'll mute myself.
and you're
Great.
Okay.
very welcome. And when we're going to have you back on when we get the video thing sorted.
Oh, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, we do.
I was so looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
we were looking forward to seeing your friendly face as well. So.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. All right.
Cool. Well, so what I'd like to do then is sort of like, I don't know whether Andrew, whether it's, he's been very patient. He was in the chat a little earlier, but I understand that this is a long broadcast. He'll be able to watch it on the replay, if nothing else. But I want to jump over to to his show and to the Moonlight Graham show, which I thought was a really interesting sort of a concept. And here's his website and the podcast itself, and he's got some really cool graphics on interviewing and showcasing and highlighting some of the underdog stories that are coming, that are the topic of his show. So the question that he sent us was this, and this was kind of interesting, and that question is, how to take advantage of the Major League Baseball game at the Field of Dreams in August.
Oh no, I just did something terrible. I'm sorry.
What did you do?
Yeah, I think he's coming in from Facebook, and he said, I'm still here, and I clicked it, and I just blocked him.
Oh no! Well, you can unblock him. You'll need to unblock him.
I don't know how to do that.
Andrew, if you're listening, it wasn't intentional.
Maybe I'll go to the Facebook page and find him. Sorry about that.
Oh, and so he's also like coming in as an unknown in Facebook.
Well, he was actually on YouTube before. Let me just, I'm going into
maybe because, we had some technical issues.
Okay.
But I will, I think either way, he will be able to hear what we're saying. It's not like he's blocked from the live stream. But anyway, so moving on here, he's saying, haha, we're cool.
Oh, goody.
So
Sorry, Andrew.
And by the way, Robin, maybe you could paste that piece of text
I
in
will.
where an unknown person can actually supply their name in the chat.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I wanted to just give a shout out to Andrew because you also had a really interesting question in the Q&A for the episode. But this Field of Dreams is a tough thing from an SEO perspective because it's a movie, right? If I click on that and I look through and we investigate this as a key phrase itself, there's 162,000 people searching for this. And that's great, but it's very difficult to rank for. And if I look at who's in the top search results, look, it's Wikipedia, it's IMDb, it's Rotten Tomatoes, it's Field of Dreams movie, right? This is that movie with Kevin Costner and kind of an underdog story to the 10th degree. So I just thought that, trying to use SEO to somehow rank for this might, is really tough. Field of Dreams game is more specific to this particular event, and it's more doable, but it's got very few searches next to it. It's got a 30 difficulty. And so, Andrew, where I sort of landed with this was something outside of, basically not on-page SEO, but notice that when we go to the Field of Dreams game, actually, I'm going to open this up again. So I noticed something on this page, right? So I actually noticed that fieldofdreamtickets.com shows up in number 5 position in the search results, in spite of having only a domain authority of 7. Right, so their domain authority is relatively low, but they're on page 1. And when you go over to check out this website, well, obviously it's the tickets for this event. And Robin and I, we were both wondering whether this event is even feasible in the age of coronavirus, or what they're doing. But hear me out. Let's assume for a moment that it's still happening, or even if it got deferred a little bit. I'm assuming that, Andrew, you would want to somehow take advantage of it, and so this is kind of what I had thought. Is this that? What if you did a reverse sponsorship with them, reverse sponsorship content? I'll try to explain what I mean by that. what if you contacted them and offered to help promote the event with your podcast through one or more episodes? So the idea would be, and so instead of you asking them to sponsor you, the way reverse sponsorship, the way I work, my understanding of that term is, it's that you offer someone to sponsor them, but you get a backlink, or you get a link from them, or you get some sort of an exposure secondhand from that offer. So you have something valuable. You've got a pretty high domain authority site. You've got a successful podcast. You're well established. You've interviewed spot celebrities. I think you've got an asset. And if you were to pitch them an idea that you said, look, we're going to help, promote your event, but you need to put, what if you had our podcast that people could listen to on your website, and we'll let you use our content and our interviews with some of the athletes. I think it's just New York Yankees and the White Sox. I don't know whether you have access to any of them, but that was my idea. Is that you would get a lot of exposure back, and I think you've got a great show and good enough to be able to pitch something like that for them. So no idea whether what your response to that is, but that's kind of what I thought of here in terms of taking advantage of an event like that. Is to do that. Oh, look at this. He's come back and said, he's been speaking to a corporate sponsor on this very idea. There's probably already a major event sponsor there, but still, it's that same, sort of concept. And it's like maybe partnering with a PR agency, have someone else, or maybe even contact that he's saying not the Field of Dreams, but a company that is a major sponsor of the event. So what if you were to talk to them and basically offer your show as a way? And Robin, you sort of had a similar deal with your season that's being sponsored by the Taos Institute, right?
Yeah, a similar deal in the sense that...
Actually, they are paying you, right? So...
yes, because I'm helping them promote a book that's coming out in September, and I'm interviewing all the authors, or a number of the authors, and so it's a collaboration. So we've been mutually supporting each other. It's great, and
that's it's often these sort of sponsorship arrangements aren't necessarily about the money at all, because the amount of effort that it takes to do something like what you've put in a whole season, and there's very little, the amount of money that exchanges hands and things like that is,
the real value is that one, it's having the thought partnership. The second is that I get 2 bites at the cherry. So it goes live on my own site, it goes live on their site, where sharing the social media, I put it out to mine, they put it out to theirs. So it's really getting double the impact, and it's showing up in terms of, volume of listeners and people engaging with the content.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yep. So thank you, Andrew. And actually, I'm going to come back to a question that you had asked in our Facebook group in just a little while. Before I do that, let me just jump over to Perth, Australia, on our next show, which is the quiz and trivia show with Bevo. And, the concept for that show is 21 general knowledge questions in 15 minutes. So I'm going to open his, which I love, right? The bonus episodes and so forth. And now, here's the question that he asked. So he's using Podkite, and actually that brings me to 2 weeks from now. The founder of Podcast, Jalal, he and I have agreed. We've had a long-term conversation back and forth, and he's going to be on the show. I think it's 2 weeks from now. We'll confirm that.
That's the 13th of June.
That's the 13th of June. Thank you. So, we're really excited about that, because Podkite has recently rolled out a search term ranking feature in their sets of services that help podcasters grow. So shout out to Podkite, first of all. And then secondly, we're really looking forward to having him on and demonstrating some of these concepts here. So Bevo, if you're listening, and hopefully you're not at the moment because it's 3 a.m. in Perth, but he was asking, look, quiz and trivia are not words searched by North or South American listeners. Now, Podkite actually allows you to investigate keywords that people are using inside podcasting apps, which is sort of interesting. But Bevo, my first sort of, and I just want to, let me throw it on the screen just so that, we see some of, what he has here. And so this is the quiz and trivia show with Bevo. And one of the points that I wanted to make is that the behavior of people on search engines, for me, wouldn't be any different than how you would search for a podcast app. So the way that you do this in Google, and remember that stat of that people actually are more likely to search for podcasts on the internet in the first place. So what you do on your website and how you SEO your website is often more impactful, and you help people discover your show, from the web. Because in this case, recommendations from friends and family, social media posts, like in the data from Edison Research, from their study from last year's, from last year's analytics that they publish, and this is a major finding that they do every year that gets published in the podcasting industry. So this isn't like someone's, quick and dirty theory. These are pretty well researched and documented, and it's a once a year thing that all of us in the podcasting industry are waiting for. Well, it might be that in-app podcast search becomes more meaningful over time, but I would say that, internet-based search is still, hugely meaningful. And I would also say that just the behavior of people on when you search for something, whether you type in quiz or quiz show or quiz and trivia show, or whatever the words are that you're using to look for the content that you're looking for, isn't fundamentally different from on the internet than it would be elsewhere. And so inside the podcasting app. And so where I'm going with that is that you can likely use some, maybe even free tools to gain an understanding of how people are likely to search for your content. So Trivia Podcast, for example, actually might be, that was a pretty good opportunity from where I'm sitting. It's 770 searches for that, and low keyword difficulty. So if you were optimizing your website to rank for an article or a page on the best trivia podcast in Australia, for example, you can gain some insights from tools like this. If you don't use KW Finder, and we actually have, if anyone's curious, there is super affordable. It's a whole suite of tools. We have affiliate links that I would appreciate if you were using it, if you're checking it out. Click on SEOsaturdays.com. There's a list of these tools that we use. But another one, if you have a zero budget, is Ubersuggest and I'm going to come back to that in just a little while. That's by Neil Patel. Shout out to Neil. And it's a free research tool that does many of the same things. So if I looked for a quiz and trivia show, for example, just have to type that in correctly. And I pulled that up on Ubersuggest, the completely free tool. And it's taken a minute, and I think that's probably more because of our internet. Actually, that one gets 0 search results, a 0 quiz show trivia. What I'm saying, the point that I was going to make here is that the questions related to, let me just type trivia podcast.
While you're doing that, Jürgen, I just put the affiliate links up.
Oh, thank you for doing
into
that.
The chat stream.
Here we go. For example, trivia podcast is one of the key phrases, and I could then see related key phrases for that and see how people are likely to search for it. That's really all I was saying, right? Like, and trivia quizzes. Let me just see where there's some examples of a quiz podcast. Let me try and look for that. So that also 480, and brain quiz. That's another one that jumped out at me. 6,900 searches. So I think that the key phrases that you're looking for using one of these SEO tools, might tell you or might inform how people are likely to search for this type of content. That's really what I was trying to say. So he also asked a couple of interesting questions, like how many keywords are too many to put into the iTunes keywords tag, and when does it become stuffing? And from my perspective, as I think that there are 250 characters, and you just kind of separate them. I don't believe that iTunes keywords in the RSS feed are even being used. If you want to have your podcast found reliably, and I would love to hear in the comments from people if I'm wrong about that. But I think that if you want to be reliably have your podcast and episodes found, I know for a fact that the iTunes keyword tag on a per episode basis is not in use. And that's not going to, allow people to find your content on search engines. The keywords tag also exists at the show level above. So, you can, when you submit your podcast, you can put key phrases in there. I've looked at, and I'm attaching this for you, the Spotify delivery specifications that have recently launched. Let me just see. Just wanted to hang on a second. Just trying to open that. I've gone through the specifications for Spotify, and they talk about the iTunes keywords, and they say that they're using this somehow or might use this somewhere. I believe it when I see it. But that's one reason to maybe keep it in there or do it. But the only way that I think you can reliably, have your podcast found is through the title, through the episode title, and through your author tag. And you shouldn't spam that with key phrases. If they're legit, if you are a spodcast, a trivia broadcaster somewhere else, and that's your title, I think you could say Bevo trivia quiz podcaster, or something like that. But you still might get dinged by Apple and banned by Apple and have to go through a reapplication if you're spamming your author tag, or if you're spamming the title of your podcast with too many keywords. That said, your show naturally is a quiz show, and the name of your podcast itself, should the quiz and trivia podcast, should actually allow people to discover your show, because that's, just baked in to the name of your show. I did notice that you don't have your own website for it, and that you're running it on transistor.fm. And I think that long term, that might be an opportunity for you to actually have quiz and trivia podcast.com, for example. That was the method that we spoke to a little earlier on the show. Last question that you had here was, can my Google Analytics tracking link on pages that are not very active be detrimental to my score and somehow deprecate me? And the answer to that is no. I think Google Analytics tracking links on any pages, won't have anything to do with how well or how, you are found.
So there are specific shows that you probably did this in advance, Jürgen.
We had had a bit of a look. I mean, it seemed like in the US there was a
couple of
them. It was a popular keyword, but but I don't. But what Bevan was pointing out is he was using the Podkite tool to do this research, and that's specifically around how people search inside of podcasting apps. So, let's table it for.
Anyway, I was curious.
When Jalal joins us next week.
Yeah, excellent idea.
I think that'll be interesting.
So yes, let's move on to our Q&A. I think that's where you were heading, right?
Q&A is the last part that I wanted to head, and I really hope that our live stream still is hanging in there. But yeah, so the first question actually was from Andrew, and he was asking around. He's using StoryChief, first of all, which is super exciting. Andrew, congrats. Thank you for seeing the value in that. And what we was asking was is that, well, we talk in our content around trickling out when we publish a show and we syndicate it and we send it to Medium and we send it to Blogger and we send it to WordPress and we send it to LinkedIn and we publish it on social media. And, that's this idea of content syndication, we do it gradually. We don't do it all on one day. And the reason for that is not to avoid duplicate content penalties. That was his question. He was asking, is this simply a precaution around duplicate content? No, we're doing it so that you're spreading out the inbound links that you're earning through this content syndication method, right? So as we're publishing to Medium, to Blogger, to elsewhere, the inbound links that are showing up that Google is going to attribute and is going to help you rank happen over a period of time, and it looks more natural and it spreads out sort of the growth of your episode over multiple weeks, if that makes sense. So it looks more natural, and we found that this has helped us become visible within weeks, and instead of having just like one spike and then the spike's over, and now you're nowhere to be seen. The idea here is that it's a more steady growth of incoming links. If you have a podcast guest, you can get him to link to your show. If you can earn another couple of links from other people along the way, that's the best possible way, along with a good content grade, to get your episode into the top search results.
And she might help you too.
Who?
She.
Who?
You said he.
Oh, he and she. Sorry. Well, he or she, right? Because in this case it was Andy, so sorry.
Yeah.
I was gender stuck on the name Andy. It could have been a she, yeah. But no. All right, so the second question that we got is episode ideas for 2-minute podcasts. And yeah, a lot of what we're doing has to do with comprehensive content coverage, but here Bo Kaufman and Robin, I'm going to say he.
Yes.
If that's okay.
What is a little male face there? I'll accept that.
Oh my God, we're going to get into trouble. So Bo, asked this interesting question, and he's asking hey, we just have short daily podcasts. Could we still use SEO or some of our methodologies to do that, or Content Brief, for example? And so actually, Susan from one of our, there were a couple of interesting ideas that had cropped up. For example, cover different localities or neighborhoods in on your in your show. But what I sort of thought was that if you did have monthly shows and you actually look at some of the results from the SEO tools, you get all the questions that people are asking about a subset. And I think each one of these questions could just be a real simple topic. So again, sort of a plug for using a tool like Ubersuggest, which is free. And I'm going to jump in here and see whether I can find the Q&A, whether I did I make a list here? No, let me just do it live. Then if I go to Ubersuggest, for example, and we type in, how to buy a home, and I then look at the results that come up. So there are this is completely free, Bo, right? I mean, so good search volume. People are actually looking for it. It's actually easy to rank for, which is a little bit surprising. But if I look at his section on keyword ideas, here are a bunch of ideas that, how to buy a home, first-time home buyer. You might get inspiration from that. But even the questions, or especially the questions that people are likely to ask for this are, would make great topics. So you could just go through these sort of questions, and I'm sure you would find a ton of ideas for 2-minute episodes, or for a little tip, or for doing something where you give your take on that particular topic. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that sort of helps maybe answer one of those questions. Yeah, so here's what I actually pulled it up on the screen. This is what we just did live at Bo. So I'm hoping that maybe that's a helpful. Now our friend Susan asked an interesting question, and actually this wasn't coming from a podcast. This was from an article and from writing topic briefs, and this was work that Robin was doing earlier in the week that I thought was interesting, and it was a common question. It's a good question, and that is. We had wanted to optimize an article for roles and responsibilities, and that had 23,000 searches. But we decided to optimize for define role and responsibilities. And the reason that that's sort of extended, or I won't say better, but it's a more inclusive and perhaps a smarter way of applying a key phrase, is that the one for 23,000 searches a month will be difficult to rank for, but it includes the term roles and responsibility. If you optimize for roles and responsibilities, if you optimize for defined roles and responsibilities, you automatically are also including roles and responsibilities and are optimizing for that anyway. You won't prevent, if you go into StoryChief and if you optimize a post for defined roles and responsibilities, you're not preventing it from ranking for the term roles and responsibilities. And you're actually going to rank for defined roles and responsibilities sooner, even though there are fewer searches for that. But your chance of appearing on page one are higher right away. So I'm hoping that helps someone out there. If you can capture a long tail keyword, then the shorter versions are included. And for example, if we were trying to, I think, Robin, you had an example of, like if you would try to rank for quiz, in Bevo's example, and you try to just rank for quiz, you'll never get anywhere near the first page. So in Susan's case, it's different. She has a chance to rank for both versions of it, but that's why I thought that that was a clever way of why I thought it was a clever way of incorporating both key phrases in the research that you did on that one, Robbie. Mm-hmm. Okay. And one more. I think one more. Yeah, I think this last one. And that was a question around these content briefs. We demoed the content brief tool with Bob today. And I actually noticed, I didn't point it out, but even in Bob's content brief, some of the people that are ranking at the top of the results have an F or a C. So Susan's asking, well, hey, if even the people in the first place don't even have a high-level score, what's the point of me trying to get a high-level score if that's not a guarantee to rank? Well, the answer for that is sort of that, that it's a mix of, it's more, content grading alone. If you have a brand new podcast with a domain authority of 0, you could have the best content rating and it won't guarantee your place on the top of the search results. The way to think of this is that if the people in the top of the search results have an F as a content grade, that's your opportunity. You can punch above your weight. Even though they might have a higher domain authority than you do, you may still have a chance with your slightly lower domain authority site. But it could be that, you might need links. You might need a lot of social media signals. You might need other additional signals that Google values. So these ranking factors, don't operate in isolation. And, maybe what we should do is go to KW Finder again and look up something like roles and responsibilities or define roles and responsibilities. Let's look that up.
Yeah, I think that's good, Jürgen, that you say they don't exist in isolation. It's like one thing or the other, or it's a combination. And I think going back to what you were saying to Bob earlier, there's the science, there's the metrics, and, there are the numbers and the grades and all that kind of stuff that are guideposts that help us. But the reality is it's understanding the whole context, all the pieces and how they fit together. And I think the art comes in for my particular post at this particular time with where I'm at, what is going to be most beneficial to help people find the content they're wanting through the key phrases that I'm using and the grade that I'm using. So I think it's very, whilst, you know, it is holistic, and I think it also is relevant to where you're at in your own strategy, your own product development.
Yeah, I think that's very good, and so I think that, you know, here the domain authority is, you know, an important factor. You know, so are sort of the number of links that are incoming. And here, for example, we can see that for defined roles and responsibilities, Susan's domain authority is somewhere in the high 30s. So there are two ranking people here on page 1 that are below her domain authority. So I think that that gives her a really high likelihood that she'll make it in there. But then also the incoming links wind up being important, along with Facebook shares, social signals, and so forth. So it's, you know, it's exactly right. It doesn't happen in isolation. You know, these are, you know, sort of comprehensive mix of factors that play into being able to rank. So with that, I think we're coming to an end for this episode today. We really thank everyone for their patience.
It's not an episode, is it an episode?
It's an episode of SEO Saturdays, our live show episode. I don't know. Could be an episode if we want it to be.
We're fluid.
And I think we've had for the first time, actually, we've had technical difficulties. So I apologize if that was disruptive and if people got kicked off. We'll have yet to see afterwards whether YouTube will, you know, grab this and make one comprehensive, video out of it for the folks that want to see it on a replay. I'll do some investigating. I might have to stitch it together and then repost in case that we got interrupted. So I apologize. I appreciate everyone's patience. And, but in the meantime, we are excited to be back in 2 weeks. We're planning on it with the Podkite team or members of the team doing a demonstration on that. We hope to do some more content briefs using Topic and have some of our recurring guests back with us. And in the meantime, please subscribe if you've gotten value out of the show. I'd really appreciate if you were to subscribe to us on YouTube. I'd appreciate if you were to submit your podcast. If you got curious and you're just lurking, that's fine. But send us your podcast details. Allow us to talk about your show a little bit. And not last but not least, when we do this, we write show notes that'll go live, or podcast articles that will go live next week. And everyone earns a high domain authority backlink. And that is super valuable in this age of SEO for your own show.
Yep, we haven't talked about that today. And already during this streaming right now, we've had a couple of applications come in the next 2 weeks for the next show.
That's fantastic. Well, actually, I should take a look. Oh, yeah, take it from the Iron Woman. I see it here. So we'll just give a shout out really quick before we sign off, because we're running long now. But business coaching with sports parallel. And is that from Susan? Mm-hmm. So from Susan Miller. Oh, that's fantastic. Because you've known her for a long time, Robin, haven't you?
Long time.
Well, that'll be really excited. We would love to, have a closer
exciting.
look at
She
that.
actually watched one of our videos on YouTube and has reached out, which is so great. She's got a podcast of 50 episodes already.
Congrats!
I'm excited for her.
Oh, that is really cool. So we're looking forward to next time.
Yep.
So in the meantime, we'll be gradually signing off here. And, again, I appreciate, all the patience. I appreciate people hanging in there, through all the technical difficulties. And, we will see you again next time. This is a goodbye from Jürgen.
And from Robin.
Bye for now.